Okay, I am going to start by working on some of the Minuet in G. Oh, Matt, I believe it was you Tuesday. Let me get over here so I can put the chat on. All right, Matt, I believe it was you on Tuesday that we were talking about the Minuet. Was that you? And you said you couldn't find it? Okay, the reason you could not find it was because I had mentioned that I did check. I checked maybe 2 weeks ago to make sure it was there because I knew it was there, but I wanted to actually just double check. But I forgot where, and where it was in the link I have not opened yet. I believe we're in week 7. When I clicked that open, it was there, but what I did was did you find it? I made a new folder. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to break that down a little bit. I started that last class. I started the first 4 measures really just working hands separately. And what I'm going to do is put those 4 measures, let's see, is this angle good? I think that angle's pretty good. I'm going to put those 4 measures together and then do a little bit more. So we'll review the hands separately. We're in the G position. Let me just double check my range here. Yeah. All right. So the right hand, here is where you're shifting out of the position to a higher position. Then it kind of stays. It stays back in that G area for a bit. So the left hand starts with a G chord, individual notes. This first line left hand just walks down. Second line, it's going to move through that G chord, but we're focusing on 4 measures. So what happens when we put this together? The first measure has kind of like a surprise. That sounds terrible if you stop there. You have to move that B. That is a dissonance. A dissonance in music is a sound that's maybe a little unpleasant. There can be slight dissonance. There can be major, like that's kind of major. It's almost an octave. The interval is a major 7th, and that's just kind of crunchy. A minor 2nd, that is the closest any 2 notes can be. Crunchy. A couple other dissonant intervals, but when you hit this, that just sounds wrong. The right hand has to keep moving, so just be aware of that. So let me do that now without talking. And I would suggest people start with that much and repeat it before they continue. So my suggestion for an approach for this would be take a little bit right hand, work that out. If you find a spot that's a little harder, like maybe where you shift your hand up, put a little extra work. When both hands have a few measures or a line down, start again small with 2 hands and repeat. You can even do less than a measure. Let's say you're working this first measure out and you just want to make sure you're doing it right. You could stop there. When you do a few repetitions back to back, your brain just starts absorbing and retaining more. You start building a little bit of a muscle memory. So that's how I suggest you would do this. I will do these measures again in 2 measure segments. could cycle back. Then as you go on, you can either jump to the next two, or you could kind of just add a measure, but we're going to jump ahead. Now in this case, in these two measures, my hands stretch out, so I have to be careful that I have the right position in measure 3. There's small, I believe what I printed out for myself, it may not be exactly the same as the version I uploaded. I just don't know because I have a lot of versions. But there's tiny fingering written in, and usually it will work. The version I'm using, oh my gosh, it's so small, and when I printed it, it really printed small. And even this close, I'm not sure. I think that's 531. Some versions in the left hand start with a 421, which can work too. But whatever it is, I'd suggest you follow it and then develop that habit. Okay, so if you do 2 measures, then 2 more measures, then put them together. If you do 2, maybe you can just try then doing 3 and repeating that, then doing 4. You want to overlap. You don't want to have a gap where you kind of stop every time. You want to overlap. Now, let's just move ahead and let's start in the 5th measure with the right hand. At this point, you've made the octave leap, and your hand, it's going to be in the G position for a bit. And I talked about how that was a pattern last time. So you might do 1 measure a couple times and then add another measure. You can see how that goes for you. But be aware, when you go to the next line, your 2 finger, I don't know if you can see it from there, is going to cross over, down to the F sharp, and then your hand's going to move back. That will be easier to see in the overhead. So if you start in line 2, your 2 fingers on F sharp, but your thumb tucks under to the G. And then we have an easy measure. And that's where we're stopping. So usually what happens when I teach this in the classes, I kind of introduce it in very small amounts, maybe over 4 to 5 classes, a little at a time. Some people work faster than others, and I always go back and review. And usually I have people, you know, get 4 measures down hands separately, then start trying to get that together while we add maybe 2. And then these last 2 measures, they're the hardest. So I leave them till people have this down a little bit, and at that point it's easier to pull it together. So I'm not going to focus on these together now. I'm going to pick up in line 2 and go slow. And the left hand, you're in G position. And a reach. And that's all that is. By itself, that's not hard. It just takes concentration. The right hand takes extra concentration here. Okay, so start at the beginning, kind of like inch forward, inch by inch, get some hands separately, then do a little bit together and just be working on that. The other thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to start breaking down Jericho. I played through it a couple times. So we got some new notes. The facing page, let me see. They've got the A harmonic minor scale. That's not really something I focus on that much. It's not really necessary to work on that for what we do. That presents some complications that in the course of the normal class, we don't really have time to get into as far as technically. When I teach privately outside of the beginning piano classes, I don't introduce scales like this till people have studied for a couple of years. because the harmonic minor scale's got a big skip. If you look at that, it's got a big skip, and technically that means the way your hand interacts with the keys. That's more of a challenge. You don't need that to play this song. But I don't think the low note E is introduced there. I think it's right on this page. Let's look at the left hand. That's the easiest. All right, I'm going to shift this camera over. Alrighty, so here's middle C, down to the next C, and your hand's going to be in that vicinity. Your thumb's going to be on E, pinky's going to be on A, below that low C. And they have fingering there that repeats. In measure 3, left hand, there's a new note in the left hand. It's low E. That happens to be the lowest note in Furley's two. Identical note. And this is an octave. So in that first line, you've got some of that will repeat in the second line. Now in the right hand, here's our middle C. We go down to A, below middle C. Your thumb is going to go there. The fingering is over the notes. It has 2 ledger lines. One ledger line, a note on one in the treble clef right there, that's a C, and this is an A. Interestingly, this crossing over and coming back it's the exact same movement we're doing in the minuet. So you will start discovering that certain patterns turn up over and over in different pieces. So as far as this rhythm, my suggestion is really just kind of listen to how that feels and try to match that. We have 2 things going on there. We've got the syncopation because of the 8th notes tied over to that half note after that 8th rest, but I'm playing in a swing feel too. So generally, people always get this. Some people do it without the swing. Without the swing, that would be this. With swing, and either is fine. So it's almost like you've got a 5-finger position starting on the A, but you're crossing over. You're crossing down. That's kind of the end of the phrase, and there's a little bitty link that leads back to the identical thing. So as far as how to learn this, my suggestion is don't try too much at once. Take a look at that left hand. It's not really hard, it's just a little different. Then look at the right hand. Start with this phrase. Just get to the first of those intervals. Do that a couple times. Then start getting the... Once you've got this, this won't be that much harder. So play around with that, maybe your first session. Don't worry about doing it all. Once that's comfortable and you can do the line, you can add that little tail that leads into the next line. So if I put the first line together slowly, here's the little link. That was was the same. This is different. And that repeats. So today all we're going to do is we're going to wrap up this first line. I'm starting right in the middle. 3 is on middle C. And I like to say that that's just walking down. Right hand by itself, thus, is not challenging. Left hand really presents some new stuff, which presents some challenges. First of all, we've got this low E, then we've got F sharp and G sharp. On top of which, you want to use your forefinger on the F sharp. I think it's not written in. Some people sometimes put a 3 there, but you end up running out of fingers. Just walk your fingering in the same order as the notes, up by step. And let me just make sure that's visible. I'm just going to move this a little bit to get a better view. You know what? Because of the angle it's covering my pinky, I'm really going to move this. All right. Once you get that, you reach up, cross over, and that's how that would lead back. So, my suggestion is just tiptoe into this. Don't worry about getting everything at once. Get a little part. Some days do one part, some days do another part. So if we look at this whole section, and repeating back, it kind of divides nicely into half. The walk-up part, and then there's the part with the crossover. And it sounds abrupt when I stop right at the end of the page. If I don't go to, let's see, I'm sorry. If I don't go to the next chord and I stop, it really sounds abrupt. But that probably is the best way to try it a few times to make sure you're playing the B, that's correct. So just start on that. I'm not really going to work on that together now because it's not feasible to get that until you've worked it out. So here's the plan. I believe we're at the end of week 7. I want people to take a look at this. This is going to be an option. I'm going to give you 3, possibly 4 options for your final. This will be one of them. But whether or not you choose that as one of your final, you want to try it because there's new stuff here. So what happens after these lines? The last line kind of uses the material of these measures. But what happens is it's kind of stretched out. With a big fancy ending. So I'm going to end with that.